Hi, Bill. Hi, Haley. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey Tim, how you doing?
All right. So we're going to get this boring class out of the way first. I say boring because the paperwork is necessary, but it is boring for me. Okay. But you do need to see it. It'll make sense more when we do tomorrow's class, because tomorrow we're going to step you through the listing process. And the very last part of that listing process is the paperwork, but you kind of have to have an understanding of the paperwork that you need to do ahead of time. That's why we're going to do this class tonight, because we've got to get this out of the way as a matter of housekeeping. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so I guess we've got one more that's due here, but we're going to get started. Hopefully she will be here in a couple of minutes and I'll let her in the room. All right, so first off, let's get this out of the way. First off, if you take a look over here, I've opened up the screen for the Zip Forms program. Some of you may have seen this. Some of you may be seeing this for the first time. It doesn't matter. We will be going through this a little bit more later. But this is going to be the program that you all have access to that has all the documents you need. And specifically, the first page you open up is going to come with the dashboard. Now, I have several transactions in here, so I'm going to go to the transactions page, and I'm going to actually do my most recent listing, which, believe it or not, is not the first one on the list, but it's the first one that's dated. So I just listed a property at 3842 Broadway on Friday. Okay. And the reason why this one's so old is I actually was at this house back in January and they weren't really ready to list it. I gave them some tips on some things to do. And then we finally set a date for April 1st to list it. So I listed it on Friday. Okay. So basically, these are files that are stored in here. And the good part about that is once you create a file, you'll be able to go back to it and modify it. Because a lot of times what will happen, especially when you're doing the agreement of sale, is you may change some things. You may basically have to negotiate and change a number, change a deposit, or change a date. And you'll be able to go back here, just change it, resend it to your client for a digital signature, and you're good to go. Okay. Most of the time for listings, you're probably not going to have them sign it digitally. Most of the time when you're going on a listing appointment, you're going to take the paperwork with you and they'll sign it with wet signatures at the house. If you're getting the listing the same day as your appointment, which, I'm going to say half the time you do, half the time you don't. I've gone on many listing appointments where they weren't quite ready yet. And you'll find out when we go through the listing presentation process tomorrow, how certain questions you're going to ask along the way are going to determine how soon they're ready. They might be ready right away. They're calling you now because they absolutely have to sell in a heartbeat. Or it's, hey, we're trying to get an idea what our house is worth. We're thinking of selling. So you're going to have appointments in both those types of scenarios. Either way, you want to leave that appointment winning the deal here. Okay. And that's going to be what we're going to talk about tomorrow. But for today, the paperwork part. So how do you create a new file? Basically, you go to this box up here marked new, and then you put in whatever it is. So this is where you would create a new listing, a new purchase. So if you're doing a purchase, a new lease, okay, or a new lease listing, okay. And you really don't need the quick e-sign unless you're already created a file. So creating a new one, this would be what you would actually be doing. In this case here, we'd be creating a new listing. Now, when you do that, I recommend, and you can name the file anything you want. I always name it by the property address, okay? So you would put that in right here, select your location. So this is going to be, the default is going to be whatever your office is, okay? So the program for your office is going to have your office address in here. And then you would go down to this category and you would list what it is. In this case, this would be a residential property. And then you have, and we're going to list it right away as active. It's default there anyway. Your name is going to appear here. Okay. And last but not least, you can select a template. So let me give you an idea what they look like. So for my purposes, I work out of the Bethlehem office. So I would usually Bethlehem listing template for residential. Sorry about that. Notice that there is a commercial listing template as well. Okay. You also would have access if you're in Allentown. Okay. And of course, East Stroudsburg. So for me, I'm in the Bethlehem office and this is a residential listing. So I would click this. And by clicking that, what happens is this will import the most common files for you to do. Okay. So now you would hit save and you would create the file. I'm not going to do that here. I'm just showing you how to create it because I'm going to work with one that I've already created. And that way you can kind of see how it's all done and filled out. So on this property that I just listed, here's what happens. After I've created the file, you'll see up here, I've named the file 3842 Broadway. This is in South Whitehall, near our Allentown office, actually. Okay. Yes, even though I work in the Bethlehem office, I list properties anywhere. I'll even list properties in East Stroudsburg. Okay. And of course, Philadelphia as well, and all the areas around that. So now this is a summary page. I can do stuff here. I generally don't. I go right to the documents. And you'll see what happens here is the most common documents are imported here. I say the most common ones. There are different ones that you may use in certain situations, just like there is in the agreement of sale. So first we have a listing contract. Yes, we have a consumer notice. We got a seller's estimate of closing costs. We have the property disclosure, and if need be, the lead paint disclosure. This will always import, but you might be aware that if the property is newer than 1978, you don't need a lead paint disclosure. And the COVID-19 property access notice is still in here as a default. You don't need it anymore. There was a time when we had to have them sign this as well. The only time you need to fill that out is if the seller wants you to. Okay, so the seller, or actually I should say in any case, any of your clients, whether it's a buyer or a seller, if they want you to wear masks to show properties with them, you have to wear a mask. The government has lifted the restriction. You don't have to, but anybody else, if the client wants you to, then it's required that we abide by the client's wishes. So that form's there. I really haven't had anybody ask me to wear a mask in over a year. Okay. But you're going to run into somebody at some point in time that does. Okay. So just be mindful of that. So for the most part, we've created the file. All these forms have been imported for us, and we're now ready to go. So the first thing I start with is the listing contract. And there's a couple of different forms in here. I'm still using the classic one because that's the one I'm used to. They did make some changes. And you'll see that I've already filled this out. So we're going to step through this process and show you what you need to do here. So when you use the template, which I did here, this information about your office will already be filled in. Your name will not. You got to put it in, and you'll see this is very similar to the agreement of sale. Your name, cell phone number. I mean, you can put whatever you need in here. I generally use only my email, my cell phone number. I have an office number. If people leave me a voicemail on there, I won't get that message at certain times of the day. I'm in my office maybe 2 hours a day. That's about it. And then I'm on appointments. Okay, so needless to say, I don't want people to be calling a different number. I only want them to be calling my cell phone number, and that's what I tell all my clients. Okay, so now a couple of sidebars here. Just like on the agreement of sale, which we talked about last week, there's a couple of things you're going to want in front of you here. So take some notes on this. You should obviously have a copy of the tax record. So go into multi-list and print a copy of the tax record. You can look it up by address and it'll come up. Also, I always do a search to see if the listing was on the market before, which this one happens to be. I know because I sold it to her back in 2017. Okay. And so pull a copy of the old listing as well. So pull a copy of the old listing, pull a copy of the tax record, have those available, because once again, I definitely do bow to the tax record when it comes to filling in this information. And of course, by the way, it's the only place to find some of this information if it's not a listing. Remember when we were going through listings last week for buyers, you get a copy of the listing, you've got the tax ID right on there, you got the seller's disclosure. Well, on the listing side, you have to create all that. So needless to say, you don't have this available to you unless you pull the tax record. Tax record is going to give you the name of the seller, exactly as it appears the way they title it. This is a single mom, and I sold her this property, and now she's moving to Florida. Property is located at 3842 Broadway. Pretty much all I need is because that's her address. That's all I need to verify there. That would be different if this were a rental property, remember, in which case then I would take the address that they actually live at and put that in this thing, the seller's mailing address. Okay. I didn't fill out the rest of it because I already have it all down here. Okay, when you go there, you're going to, point out seller understands the listing contracts between the broker and the seller. Does the seller have a listing contract for this property with any other broker? That should always be no. If the seller ever tells you, yes, they have a live contract with someone, you can't list their property. They cannot list with more than one agent. So then you got to get to the bottom of it and find out, well, what's happening? Why am I here? Okay, well, we're not happy with their agent. Okay, well, that's something you got to take up with your agent. The only question I'm really allowed to ask them is, when is your listing going to expire? And if they say, well, it's going to expire in May. Okay, I can be here. I cannot solicit a listing that's already got a sign up. But if a person calls me directly while they're still listed with another broker and they want me to come out to the house, it's perfectly fine for you to go out to that house. However, you still could not put this property on the market before that listing contract would expire. You won't run into this very much. But there are occasions when people will call, especially if you get a referral from a friend who says, hey, I've got a friend of mine, she's been trying to sell her house and she's just not having much luck. Okay, well, if your friend wants to call me, I'd be happy to talk to her. I could even come out and give her do a visit and give her some tips and some things that maybe she could do. Okay, but never throw another agent under the bus. That's a violation of our ethics code, and you really don't want to do that because you can get called before the board if they file a complaint against you, and you can get fined and you can even get penalized. So you don't want to do that. You don't need to do that in this business. Okay. Say, look, there's lots of reasons why someone can be unhappy with an agent. It's not always the agent's fault. Maybe the seller insisted on too high of a price for the property and the agent's doing everything they can. So, now there's ways to handle that too, that maybe that agent isn't equipped with. You're going to be, because part of what we're going to talk about when we go through the listing presentation tomorrow is ways to get around that and how to do an intelligent CMA and all that good stuff. But not to get the cart before the horse, this is a very important paragraph. This should always be known. Property information, you're going to get this right from the tax record. Yes, there's the mailing address. Yes, this is in an Allentown post office, 18104. However, it's not in Allentown School District. It's in Parkland School District in South Whitehall Township. That, by the way, makes a big difference in the value of this property. So that's an important thing to pay attention to. And the zoning will also be on there. In this case, it's R5 medium density residential. Remember what I said last week? There's all different kinds of zoning codes depending on the municipality that this is in or the city that this is in. Just copy verbatim whatever is on there. Don't just put residential on there. Yes, we know it's residential, but there's a big difference between high density, medium density, and low density residential. So you want to basically put that on there. And the classification of this property is it's a single family home, but it's a twin. Okay, so we know that it is 3 sides exposed to the sun, 1 side's a common wall between the 2 houses. So whatever the designation is, it is. And of course, there's the tax ID. Put that in there because this is actually the only number that's meaningful here, because post office could change your street name, they could change your house number, they can't change your tax ID. So the legal description attached to this property, that would be the deed, is based on this tax ID. Okay. All right. And just like on the agreement of sale, if you had the tax ID, you don't need all the rest of this stuff. So just work with the tax ID. Starting and ending date of the listing contract. Now, you don't have to do this. You're allowed to put a specific date in here. So first off, under the starting date, the contract starts when signed, unless otherwise stated here. Well, then I don't need to put anything here. Okay. The ending date. My contracts all run 6 months. I just type in 180 days. You can put a specific date in. I just use 180 days. Entirely up to you. Either one's fine. Just like on the agreement of sale, we got to explain dual agency to them. I'm not going to go into that conversation again. We talked about it last week, and we are going to touch on the consumer notice anyway, where we'll explain dual agency and designated agency. But if I'm disclosing the contract, I'm going through there like this, and I'm going to explain it to them at this point in time. And I'll say dual agency would be if I sell your listing. And if you don't want me to sell your listing because you don't want me to represent a buyer and seller in the same transaction, you're allowed to, as a seller, forbid me from doing that. However, I've never had anyone do that, because if you don't want to participate in dual agency, you're also eliminating the 108 agents that work in my company, not just myself. In which case, agents in my company could be a designated buyer agent. However, we don't practice designated agent anyway. So the bottom line is that we would all be dual agents in any type of an in-house deal. Okay, so, all right. Broker's fee, you should always be working with 6%. Honestly, I don't know. I sometimes have people call me and say, hey, this person won't let me list it at 6%. I want 5. They want us to be at 5. Well, you haven't built enough value up in yourself if that's the case. I always work with a 6% commission. Okay. And I don't charge them any junk fees. It's a 6% commission. I collect 0 if we don't sell the property. Okay. Brokers are allowed to charge you a fee that is non-refundable after you sign this listing contract, even if they don't sell the house. Some agencies do that. We don't. Okay. You'll see that both you and the seller all have to initial these pages. Seller will pay the balance broker's fee. Well, it doesn't apply in this case. We don't have any. In fact, the only part of this paragraph that applies is that the sale occurs within 90 days of the ending date. Okay, so basically, if a sale occurs after the ending date of our contract, that's when 180 days, that hasn't happened in a while. Okay, and the seller wants to sell the property themselves, they can, but they can't sell it to the 30 or 40 or 50 people that saw this property during the term of the listing for a period of 90 days. It's called the fee protection period. Why is it there? Well, because sometimes during the course of the showings, some slide devil is going to get on the side and contact the seller directly. They're not supposed to do that, but the public sometimes does things they're not supposed to do. And they're going to talk to the seller and say, hey, when does your listing expire? I'd rather buy the property directly from you, and we can cut the realtor out of the mix. And that's an enticement to the seller. So you have to have a conversation with them and tell them how dangerous that is. We'll cover that in the listing process. Okay. So by the time we've gotten, by the way, to this paperwork part, we've already had a listing presentation, but I'm starting with the paperwork first so that you know how to fill it out. So when I explain that to them, I say, now that does not apply, that if for some reason you're unhappy with me and my company and our listing expires and you want to hire another agent to represent you, you're perfectly free to do that. And this 90-day clause does not apply. This only applies if you decide to try selling the property yourself, which you can do, but you cannot sell it to the people that already looked at it for a period of 90 days. This is simply there, and this could be any number you want. 90 days is plenty, however. I've seen 180, I've seen 1 year. It can't be more than 1 year. But honestly, I don't need to tie up the seller that much because first off, my listing's not going to expire and we're going to sell it. So I don't really spend that much time on there. I'm spending more on it now with you guys so that you understand what the meaning of it is. In fact, when I go through the listing presentation, I kind of go through it like this. So we're going to list your property for 6 months. Don't worry, we'll get it sold much before that, but that's the period of time that our marketing plan fits. Okay. By the way, if you don't want me to sell your house personally, then you wouldn't participate in dual agency. Obviously, you probably want me to also have a shot at selling it, and I'll do my best to do that. But more likely, because there's 3,000 agents with a real estate license, all working with buyers, someone's going to have a buyer ready, willing, and able to go right away before I get there. Okay. And, so dual agency usually isn't an issue, but if you don't want to participate in it, it's your right. The fee is going to be 6%. We're going to split that with another agent. So the bottom line is that we're going to collect some, they're going to collect some. That covers our marketing costs and it helps you get the highest and best price and hopefully a multiple offer situation. There's no extra fees, so we don't need to read anything into that. By the way, if we happen to not sell your property within that 6-month period of time and you decide you want to sell it yourself, you can do that. However, you can't sell it to any of the people that showed the property. So if there were 40 or 50 people that showed it and didn't buy it, which is unheard of in any case at this point. But if that should happen, you could sell it on your own, just not to those people for a period of 90 days. And that's only if you decide to sell it yourself. If you decide to, list it with someone else, that's fine. That clause doesn't apply because those people still working with those agents are allowed to bring offers to a different agent. And here's the good news. Broker's fee, if the settlement does not occur, is 0. So we basically take some risk. We're going to spend some money marketing your property, putting it in all these places. And I'm saying this to them after I've done the presentation. We're going to put it in all those places I already told you about, those 1,200 websites. And we're going to do the enhanced listings on the top sites. All those things we're going to do. So just so you're aware of that. Okay. Cooperation with other brokers. Now, this is a little different than you're going to find from most companies, but this is the real world scenario right now. For years, and this is really for the benefit of you brand new people, or for you people who have bought properties in the past or sold properties in the past, okay, the tradition was 6% real estate fee. And we would pay out 3% to a buyer agent or a sub agent or transactional licensee. And we as the listing agent would keep 3%. That dynamic has changed in the last 2 years. And here's the reason why. Every time that I worked with a buyer for the last couple of years, I'm going to say starting in 2019, no one was paying out 3%. They were paying out 2.5, and the listing agent was keeping 3.5. And that was kind of annoying. And there was a lot of pushback on it. And there were conversations that went back and forth. Well, that's not fair and all this. Keep in mind, and you just came out of real estate school, so you know this, the commission's negotiable. It's always been negotiable. There's no set fee, and it's illegal for us to basically say that there's a set fee. It's fine for you to say our company policy is that we work at 6%. And by the way, that's in keeping with what most companies charge in Lehigh Valley for full service. it's here and fair for me to tell you that there are discount brokers you can hire, which will work for less a fee, and they will get you less activity and probably a lesser price. Okay, so there's a reason we represent you with our full services and all the things you do. Keep in mind, by the time I'm getting to this commission conversation, unless it has come up previously in the listing presentation, which sometimes it does, this is pretty much a no-brainer. And I just tell them, this is pretty much the way it is. And nowadays, pull any listing, pretty much the buyer fee is going to be, except for on a rare occasion, you'll see someone that's actually paying 3. You'll generally see 2.5. On some occasions, you'll see 2, and I won't work for 2%. In that case there, I'll charge my buyer the fee to make up the difference, or I will try to gain it from the seller. I cover that more on the buyer brokerage contract. But the point is, you do deserve to get paid for what you do. Don't shortchange yourself. Don't think of yourself in your mind as a discount broker. Don't be someone who thinks you can't get the listing unless you discount your services. When I get done showing you this listing presentation tomorrow, you're going to see why you're going to be the best choice for this person at the end of the day, if you do this right. And that's going to be how you win. And don't miss this class tomorrow, by the way, because I'll give you a little background on it. I started in 1987, and for 5, 6, 7 years, I was pretty much averaging 1 out of 3 listings. That was about the average at the time. Most people were doing that. And then I took this course by a fellow by the name of Steve Woodruff. I don't think he's around anymore because this was in the early 90s. And I got my mortgage guy, by the way, to pay for the course. It was a 1-day course in Philadelphia. Lauren and I both went, and a few other agents in the office at that time. And we took this 1-day course. And that's the course you're going to see tomorrow. Some of it's a little bit dated because it's from 1992, but I'll step you through the changes on that. However, once I took this course and adapted and I guess retained that presentation, takes a little bit of practice, my listing average went from like 9 out of 10 or 19 out of 20. In fact, it got to the point where if I didn't get the listing, I walked away scratching my head wondering why. Maybe it was just a personality conflict. I don't know. But the bottom line was that you will win hands down over most of your competition. And just like on the agreement of sale that I mentioned last week, if you do it right, they're never going to say how long you've been doing this. Now, if you're listening to your mom's house, she's going to know how long you've been doing this. But even so, you'll be able to get over that as well. Okay. So yeah, people that are in your warm market that know you are going to know that. But, and I'm not saying to lie. Somebody asked that question last week. No, you don't have to. You're simply going to make a presentation that comes off so polished and so thought out that they're not even going to ask you how long you've been doing this. You're just going to seem like you know it so well that you've been doing it since you were 2 years old. So back to the commission part. This is what I do. I'm not telling you you have to do this. Okay. I'm telling you that I've been very successful doing 2.5. And here's the way I average it out. Every time I represent a buyer, I don't make an argument anymore. If they're paying 2.5, I accept the 2.5. But keep in mind, when I list a property, I'm collecting 3.5. That's a way to keep your income balanced at the end of the year, because you will make more money as a listing agent than you will as a buyer agent. Even though as brand new agents, you'll usually start out with buyers. Over time, you'll get really good at listing too. In fact, that's the secret to long-term success in the real estate industry. So you're going to definitely want to pay attention to that class tomorrow. Won't be the last time you see it. You're going to see an outline tomorrow that's kind of a theory. Then we're going to explore that on Wednesday and on how it works in the practical sense. And we're going to weave in how to do a proper CMA at the same time. So this is going to be a very important presentation this week. All right. So just do that. I mean, that's what I do. 2.5, 2.5. And I say it's still 6%, but due to the higher cost of marketing and all the extra services we provide to help enhance your listing, and I've already covered that in my listing presentation, I say we pretty much have to cover those costs, and pretty much all buyer agents are working at 2.5 nowadays. I want you to be, and you'll get people ask you, well, why is the commission even that high? Well, the bottom line is that you got to understand that you're in competition with other listings that are on the market. You've got to basically be competitive with the people in your marketplace. So if someone else is charging or paying out 2.5, you need to do the same thing. And we simply, as a matter of fact, have to collect a 6% commission. Generally, I don't have a problem with commission because, like I said, by the time we have a serious discussion about it, we've already won the deal at the end of the day. What do really sellers care about at the end of the day? They don't care about the commission. They care about the bottom line. Okay. What's the net I'm going to walk away with from the sale of this property? That's the only number that the seller is actually focused on. And yes, by the way, transactional licensee, you might remember from class what that is. That's someone that's not representing anybody. And first off, they have to be licensed. You can't just say, well, I'm going to bring my brother in to represent me and you got to pay him. No, he's not licensed. We can't pay him. Okay. We can only pay licensed real estate brokers. All right. Duties of the broker and seller, I go through it and I say, so basically we're going to work in your best interest to help you get the highest and best price for your property. You basically only have one thing that you have to do for us. You have to cooperate with us to assist in the sale of the property. And that means that if we get appointments to schedule your listing, we don't want to have you canceling those appointments or have you not, accommodate them. Now, that doesn't mean to say that if it's 12 o'clock on a Saturday and my office calls you and said someone wants to see your property at 1 o'clock, no, it's perfectly fine for you to say, no, that's just not going to work for me. And in fact, if you want to, we can even put something in there that says you need 12-hour notice for showings or even 24-hour notice for showings. I know when we list a property that's a rental property, we legally have to give the tenants 24-hour notice before we can show the building. So agents will work around that. Okay. But whatever way you can help to make it as easy as possible to show your house will certainly go a long way. Now, if I'm having this conversation with someone and they're not living, they already moved out, or it's an estate sale and it's a vacant property, I'll pretty much assume. So I'm assuming that there's not going to be anyone here. There's no dogs that have to be walked or anything like that. We can probably just give them instant confirmation. And, oh yeah, that'll be fine. But if they're living in the house still, which a lot of times they are, then you have to be mindful of what their issues are. In this particular case, for example, this woman is a single mom. Her kids are older now. They're, I think in like early high school or something like that. So, but she still doesn't want anyone showing the property after 3 p.m. until 6 p.m. because then she gets home from work. So we're allowed to show this property during the day. Showings get cut off at 3 p.m. and they can resume at 6 p.m. And in the Showing Time app, which I'll show you later, there's a way that you can set that up so that you can block out the time that there are no showings for this property. So, these are just the questions you have to figure out as you go. So seller will cooperate with the broker to assist the property. Any all showings, negotiations, and discussions about the property, written or oral, will be communicated by me to you. And okay, it's not a lease. Okay. And you can't sell, you can't, okay, that all has to do with leases. That would only apply if we were leasing the property. My broker service to buyer says that I can also assist the buyer in buying this property, and that's not a unrepresentation of you. It means that I'm allowed to help them find mortgage companies to work with and inspection companies or whatever the case may be. Very important, broker not responsible for damage. As I tell them, just because you list your property with me doesn't mean that if someone breaks in, even if they break my lockbox and use a key to get in, that we're responsible. We don't insure your building. Simply put, that's part of your homeowner's insurance. Don't let that lapse. Keep your property insured. Okay. Deposit money basically is the deposit money that's held. We held that according to the rules of escrow in the state of Pennsylvania. We hold that in escrow and it's only refunded to you upon a successful settlement or a termination of the agreement of sale for whatever reason. Okay. But that's how deposit money works. I don't have to have a long discussion about that. Okay. Other properties just says that I'm not signing a no compete clause. So if your neighbor across the street sees my sign and says, hey, I'd like you to list my house too, I'm allowed to do that. Okay. Additional offers says that I don't have to present additional offers for the property once you sign a contract. The bottom line is I would. In fact, I highly recommend taking backup offers. Let me explain what that means. In this market right now, we usually end up in a multiple offer situation. Now, don't say that if you're listing a $500,000 or above property, because we don't always end up in a multiple offer situation on $500,000 property. Sometimes we do, but if you list anything under $300,000, you're almost always going to be in a multiple offer situation, at least in the current market. Obviously, when that wasn't true, I would tell them if we would end up in a multiple offer situation, we would only be able to pick one, but I would certainly keep the other offer, or in this case, 5, on the fence. By the way, I listed this house Friday night. I didn't make it live until yesterday because I just had stuff to do. Anyway, I made it live last night around, I'm going to say 6 o'clock in the evening. I have 14 showings scheduled in this building already. Some of them already happened today. Some of them are happening, well, not right now, but they'll be starting at 6 o'clock again. And I have appointments scheduled through Wednesday at this point, last time I looked. So that is the kind of crazy market we're in right now. Okay. Anyway, so under additional offers, I do take backup offers. Backup offer simply means that I keep their contract and I call them in a week or two if something goes wrong. Let's say they don't give me my deposit. Remember, our agreement of sale said the deposit money is due within 5 days. I've had people not do that. And I'd say to them, look, if I don't get your deposit tomorrow, I'm canceling your sale and we're going to take one of the other offers. So that lets them know that, don't fool around with me here. I have an agent that talked to me earlier that they didn't get the deposit on time. That's a voidable contract at this point. And if I had a backup offer, I'd absolutely be hammering them and calling the backup offers and say, hey, are you guys still interested or did you buy something? Because if you haven't, I'm getting a little bit squirrely on this other offer I have. We're thinking of just walking away from it, which we would legally have a right to do if that deposit does come in. Look, that's the first times of the essence clause on the contract is the deposit. If they're going to, flake on that, I'm not sure I want to be involved or invested in this offer on the property. And I'm going to have that conversation with my seller. Keep in mind, I can have the conversation. The decision's always the seller's, but our job is to make sure that we're giving them the best advice as we can. If the seller says, no, that's fine, I really like them people, give them a couple more days, then that's what we have to do, even though it might be against my better judgment. All right. 14, I'll tell them, okay, so this is the paragraph that tells you that you have to reveal any defects or environmental hazards. We haven't done that yet, but I've got a 11-page form here we're going to be going through shortly. You just got to tell the truth on that. So we'll come back to that. By the way, if your property was built before 1978, and this property was, okay, I'll tell them there's a separate addendum we have to fill out that has to do with lead paint. All they're going to ask you is, have you ever tested, or are there any reports for lead paint? If the answer is no, and you've never tested it, that's all you're going to say. Home warranties, I'm obligated to let you know that home warranties are available for your property. You can buy one and give it to the buyer at settlement, okay? By the way, there's 2 pluses to that. One of the things is that, first off, they only cost about $500, and they will cover things that break in your house while you are listing, and they'll give the buyer a full year. So if you get this property on the market and your hot water heater goes next week, your home warranty would cover you for the replacement of that hot water heater, not you. If it breaks during the term of a contract that hasn't settled yet, you as the seller are responsible. So it is something to think about. I'm not saying you should buy one. I'm just letting you know that if you do decide that you'd like to cover it with a home warranty, it can enhance your listing, because you're going to say that the seller is willing to give the buyer a 1-year home warranty. They come and go, and it depends on the seller's mood. And the good news is you don't pay anything for it now. There's simply going to be something you're going to pay for on the settlement statement. So you can think about that. We don't care whether they buy it or not. Our job is to make sure they know it exists, because if they don't know it exists and something comes back to haunt them and they say, well, you never told me that there was a home warranty I could buy, that's where you run into trouble. There's a reason why these contracts are the way they are. There's a reason for every paragraph on here, because somebody did something that they got sued for, and we don't want that to be you. Okay. Here's a new clause. This was added recently. I'm not sure exactly when. Usually they put a little note on here. Anyway, so this within the last 2 years, they added this. So basically, seller understands that potential buyers viewing the property may engage in photography, videography, or video telephony. And I've had people do that. Husband showing the house of the wife. They're relocating. She's at home in Boston. He's here looking at properties, and he's walking through the house. It's perfectly fine to do that, but we have to disclose it. That's all this is. Okay. We advise them to lock away any personal or confidential stuff. We also advise them to hide their jewelry. Don't leave cash sitting on your coffee table. I mean, don't be stupid is kind of what you're saying to them. I don't say it in those words, but that's the kind of mindset. Keep in mind, while people are going to come through your house that we've never met before, and that they are coming through with licensed and bonded agents, the bottom line is, don't risk it by having something tempting going on here. Don't leave personal stuff laying out. Really shouldn't even have your mail out. You don't know who's stealing identities these days, and just best to just not even take the risk. So recordings for the property and all that are important things, and we talk about that. Don't leave any personal identifiable information such as birthday, social security numbers, telephone numbers, blah blah blah. Seller is responsible for providing this same notification to any occupants of the property. All right. Any person who intentionally intercepts oral communication by electronic or other means without the consent of all parties is guilty of a felony under Pennsylvania law. Okay, so needless to say, there's some important serious stuff here. And you, as the seller, is also releasing you and the licensees, employees, office partners, anyone of them and any other firm or corporation may be liable by or through them from on any claims, lawsuits, actions which may arise from audio or video recordings occurring in or around the property. So it's 2022. We all have cameras on our phones and video cameras on our phones. I mean, When I did this in the 90s, people actually had to bring a camcorder with them if they wanted to take photography of the house. And we actually got permission from the seller to do so in that strange situation when someone was looking at a property and sending it back to the wife or the husband to see it, later on. Obviously, nowadays we put videos on our properties, at least if we can get them done before the properties get sold. I already scheduled this one. I'm thinking the house will get, I haven't done a video on one of my listings in over a year. I know the video guys hate it because we pay them a lot of money to do them, but just haven't needed to. Now, that's not true on commercial. Some commercial properties I have, but not on residential because I put them on the market. They're sold in 3 to 5 days. So we can't get our videographer there in time. Honestly, that usually takes them a week or two. And forget the drone. I mean, if you're doing a drone tour, you got to wait for the right conditions, the right weather, the right piloting conditions. Sometimes you need a permit, depending on if it's in the traffic control zone. If the property's in that zone, then you have to get permission from the FCC. It's a whole rigmarole. The pilots know all this, by the way, but needless to say, by the time you schedule a video tour, it's a month later. And in residential right now, you don't need a month. Okay, so we're saving ourselves some money there. Okay. And real estate recovery fund, you've heard this before. Notice some of these same things you see on the agreement of sale is also on here. So there is a real estate recovery fund that to reimburse persons who received a final court ruling or civil judgment against a Pennsylvania real estate licensee, that's you and me, due to fraud, misrepresentation, or deceit in a real estate transaction. And the fund repays persons who have not been able to collect the judgment after trying all lawful ways to do so. So in short, if someone makes an offer in his house and gives me $10,000 check, and I go to the casino tonight and I lose and I leave the country and Lauren leaves the country too, meaning the brokerage left the country, you would be reimbursed by the real estate commission through the recovery fund. And 19 is real simple, self-explanatory. If you're selling or renting housing in Pennsylvania, you can't discriminate for anything you can think of and things you can't think of, everything, okay? Transfer the contract just means that if someday Century 21 changes their name to Century 22, we don't have to get all new contracts signed, okay? That may happen in this, this century at some point. I mean, it was Century 21 in the 20th century. So who knows? I probably won't be around to see it, but some of you may. Or if Lauren sells the company sometime, which I don't think that's happening anytime soon, unless he sells it to me, then we'll change it. But anyway, transfer the contract just means that we don't have to go around and get all new signatures from our sellers and our buyers. Whoever buys the company inherits the contracts. That's all that means. Know the contracts before the ending date of this contract, and it would be a conflict of interest if I had a personal interest in buying your house. So for the record, I'm here to tell you I'm not going to be buying your house. So no conflict of interest. By the way, that's true. If you want to buy someone's house when you're listing it, you can't list their house and represent you and them in the same contract. It's that simple. Doesn't mean you can't buy their house. Just means you can't list it and then buy it later. So if you're going to buy someone's house before it goes to the market, you should make sure you tell them that up front and don't have them sign a contract. Instead, write an agreement of sale. All right. This is the entire contract. Any changes have to be in writing. And that's what all this says here. And for marketing your property, and here's where we get into some of the stuff. Now, you remember what I told you when I'm going to market it. So if you go through the marketing part of this, basically, if this really reads like a double negative, if you don't want us to do some of the services we normally do, then you check the box. So for example, if you don't want your property listed on the internet, I would check this box. If you don't want the address of the property listed on the internet, I have to check this box. So, obviously you do want that. Let's see. And also, if you don't want to receive comments about your listing, then we can't send you a hyperlink. We can just call you on the phone. Obviously, I like to be able to forward direct comments to you. Automatic estimates of market value of seller's listing or hyperlink to such estimates in immediate conjunction with the seller's listing. If you don't want us to send that, we don't have to. And then, of course, the only box we do check is the one that says broker will use a multiple listing service. In fact, we use 8. That's what I tell them. So we're going to put your property everywhere. But if you didn't want it to be in the multi-list, I would have to check this box. Okay. So the only box that we do here is we do full service marketing. We do put you on the internet. We do all these things unless you tell us not to. Okay. And you as the seller are agreeing that the broker and licensees, the MLS, are not responsible for mistakes in the MLS or advertising the property. That can happen. If you see something in your listing that's a mistake, we try to correct it immediately. Sometimes if there's a mistake in the listing, like it's put in the wrong area, the board catches it right away. And then they tell us we got to change it within 72 hours or we get fined. And that's all true. Okay. Publication of sale price, we don't go and tell the morning call what your house sold for, but they do go around us and pull it from the tax records once the property is settled. Copyright, Same thing as it means on anything. If you give me photographs of the property that you want me to use in the listing, which I generally don't do, but there are occasions when I do, then once they're on the internet, I have no control over them. They're on the internet forever. Now, I generally do all my own photography when it comes to listing your house, but sometimes if I'm listing a house and it's January and there's 2 feet of snow on the ground and the seller says, well, I've got a nice picture, spring picture of my house when the flowers are all in bloom, can you use that? Absolutely, I can. Just so you know, I can't protect it. Once it's on the internet, it's on the internet. But if you're giving me permission to use your picture, I will. And I have used sellers' photographs in situations exactly like that. But generally speaking, I'll take better photos, or if you're using a photographer, better photos than the seller's going to give me anyway. Sometimes they'll have stuff in their photos that I can't legally do. Like, it's illegal to have your company yard sign in the photo. Not that the seller would have a picture of that, but make sure that when you're taking outside shots of the house, first off, use your phone like this in landscape mode. Don't use it in the portrait mode. Second, make sure you don't take pictures of the kids, the dog, or the seller in any of those photos. Try to be careful not to even take pictures of their pictures. Now, generally, if you're far enough away, it's not going to be something they can really see. But we don't tell them to take all their photos down. But the bottom line is you want to be mindful when you're taking pictures of the house, not to be taking that same personal information. We just talked about them not leaving things on, don't leave your mail laying out. Okay, things like that. So things like you're showing your house, make it shine the best as you can. Make your bed every day. I tell them that. If you were selling a car by yourself and you were putting it out on, let's say, one of your neighbors who lives on 309 or at Busy Road, and you put a for sale sign on it, first thing you do is you'd vacuum it, you clean it, you'd clean the windows, you'd simonize it, and you put it out there, make it show its best. That's called curb appeal. You got to do the same thing with your house. But that doesn't just pertain to how it looks on the outside. It also has to do with how it looks on the inside. And we give them tips like that when we go through the listing presentation. So copyright, we can't protect you from it. Once it's on the internet, it's there forever. Now notice paragraph 28, fixtures and personal property. This is verbatim with what's on the agreement of sale. We went through this last week, so I'm not going to do it again. But make sure you read the clause verbatim. This is one of the few clauses I read it exactly as it appears in the contract, so that if there's something and you'd be amazed when you read this, how they go, oh, really? I didn't know I couldn't take the brackets from my TVs. Oh, really? I didn't know that I couldn't take my fireplace screen and equipment. Well, you can actually do anything you want as long as you list it as an exclusion. However, customarily, those things are considered permanently attached fixtures to the property. So, including the sale, all existing items from installed on the property for your liens and other items, including plumbing, heating, radiator covers, hardwired security systems, thermostats, lighting fixtures, which includes chandeliers and ceiling fans, pool and spa equipment, including covers and cleaning equipment, electric animal fencing systems, excluding the dog collars. They get to keep those. Garage door openers, transmitters, unpotted shrubbery, plantings, and trees. So the plants in your garden have to stay. You got a vegetable garden back there. Guess what? You're leaving the vegetables with whomever. Okay, they're supposed to stay. They're permanently in the ground. Well, they're permanently until you take them out and eat them, I guess. Anyway, they're all supposed to stay, unless they're not, in which case you can list them as exclusions. And any remaining heating and cooking fuel stored on property, by the way, what kind of heat do you have? Oil heat? Okay, stop your automatic deliveries right away. This is a perfect time for you to remind the seller, do not get any more automatic deliveries. Keep an eye on your oil. It's February. Let's keep your house warm, of course, but don't get any automatic deliveries as we get closer to the warmer weather. If you need a little bit, buy as minimum as possible, because whatever is left in the tank goes with the house. You got firewood in the yard, there's 3 cords of wood. That's going to stay unless you say it's not going to stay. You got 30 bags of pellets for your pellet stove. You got, a 3 ton of coal in your coal bin outside. Whatever heating and cooking fuel stored on the property that's there, if you don't have that conversation, it stays. So have the conversation. If they have things they want to exclude, they can exclude them down here, and the buyer, if they accept it, then you're clear. Just make sure you're clear. And then ask them if anything they have is leased, such as propane tanks, water softener systems, satellite dishes. You can't convey something you don't own, but you have to disclose it. And that way the buyer can have the choice as to whether they want to continue service with that company or not. You'd be amazed how many people have leased water coolers in their house nowadays. They don't want to drink their own water, so they have a water cooler. They get tired of buying a bottle of water, so they have a water cooler. It's fine. They get those big bottles delivered, and that's fine, but they usually don't own the machine. Now, if you go to Sam's Club, you can buy one, but then you gotta pay for the water anyway. If you have a service, they come deliver it for you. So they don't put it in the tank for you though. Those things aren't light. I know I have to do it all the time at the office. Okay. So that's it. I hope that's clear enough that I can't hammer this home enough. Just like I said last week on the agreement of sale, this is an area that can be a deal killer for people, both on the selling side and on the listing side. Under this, the rest of this, I basically fill out what I can here. Taxes and special assessments. If you have any special assessments, we should talk about that now. But I just generally put the yearly property taxes. They're going to be on the copy of the tax record. And I put in the what the assessed value is. Is property preferentially assessed, including a tax abatement for the property? Usually that's no. Keep in mind when we talked about that last week on the agreement of sale, that's for farmland, forest land, forestation. If you're in a conservation district or on larger than 10 acres, it could be an Act 319. This would be where you would list that if you have it. Same thing with HOA or condos. If the property is in a condo or an HOA, you would list the information here. Other than that, there's nothing else here for you to really fill out. Seller will give possession of the property to a buyer at settlement or on. Just at settlement. There's nothing to fill in here. At settlement, seller would give full rights of ownership to a buyer except as follows. So if you were actually keeping the minerals, and we talked about this in the agreement of sale, this would be where it would be disclosed. I've never filled this out. Okay. And I can list their mortgage information. I don't need to. The title search is going to find all that. Okay. If the seller has judgments, I don't need to ask them that. It's going to be asked on the seller's disclosure. So if they answer yes on the seller's disclosure, I may come back and fill it in here, but it's rarely something you'll find that you have to do. We did have to do a few of those a few years ago when we were doing a lot of short sales. That would be after 2008 until about 2012 that we did short sales. You don't even want to know what that is, by the way, if you don't have to. And buyer financing, I fill in. If it applies, if the house is nice, it'll go cash, conventional, FHA, and VI. I check them all. If it's a dump, then it will go cash or conventional. That's pretty much it. Mostly you're not listing dumps unless you're dealing with bank-owned properties and things like that. And if there are any special instructions, it has to conform with the Pennsylvania Plain Language Consumer Contract Act. Okay. If there are any special clauses, this would be where they would be. Generally, we don't have them, but sometimes you'll have it if you are doing a short sale. We had to do when we were doing those. Haven't done one in a few years. If you're doing vacant land, you would maybe see something here where you have to attach a vacant land addendum. Consumer services fee addendum, no. Single agency addendum should never work as a single agent. Property, that would be if someone didn't want to participate in dual agency, then you have a single agency addendum. I've never had someone refuse to work as a dual agent. In other words, they've always said, oh no, Tim, we want you to sell it if you can. Yeah, okay. Any additional terms you can fill in here. We do that quite often on the agreement of sale. That block is a little bit smaller on here, but we generally don't have a reason to use it here. But I mean, I think I might have used it in the past for something. I don't recall though. It's just rare, just for something odd. Then they get the initial here that they've read the consumer notice, even though they haven't yet. They've received the seller's property disclosure form and agreed to complete it and return to listing broker in a timely manner. I get it at the listing. Do it right away. The only time I don't do it at the listing is if I am doing this appointment where we're doing it virtually, or I'm there at the property, but they're not. Maybe they live 3 states away and they want me to sell their property. Okay, then I'm probably going to send them the paperwork digitally. I'll go through this seller's disclosure with them over the phone. We'll fill it out. They'll digitally sign it, and then I'll get it. And if needed, that they've received the lead-based paint hazard disclosure form too. That's it. Seller has read the entire contract before signing. Seller must sign this contract. Seller gives permission for the broker to send information about this transaction to anybody that they want us to. Return of this agreement by any addenda and amendments, including return by electronic transmission bearing the signatures of all parties, constant acceptance by the parties, and it may be executed in one or more counterparts, each of which shall be deemed to be an original, and which counterparts together shall constitute one and the same. When do you run into that? Divorce situation. Sometimes that happens. Okay. So you got a divorce situation, and be very careful here. Just went through one of these with somebody like a month ago. Husband doesn't want the wife to know that, well, the ex-husband doesn't want the ex-wife to know his email address. The ex-wife doesn't want the ex-husband to know their email address. One of them has a PFA against the other. You don't want to get involved in the middle of that, but you do represent both parties equally. So you got to be very careful that you're sending documents to them individually, never joined. Okay. That's why this clause right here means I can have a contract signed by the husband. I can have a contract signed by the wife, or maybe they're still husband and wife and the divorce isn't final. But the bottom line is I can still sell the property as long as there's a property settlement agreement. All right. I can actually sell it without that. but they can't get paid until they have a property settlement agreement. That's it. And of course, the name is there. Put that in. We're there. I'm here, and they sign it, and we sign it in person. Let me point out one thing that's not on this contract, because I come to the house with this already prepared. What's not here is the list price. I don't know that up front. So once I'm in the property and we meet and we sign the paperwork, we're going to go through a CMA. We're going to determine the list price. Just write it in. That's all you have to do. And then everything is signed. You sign it, they sign it. And then I don't keep a copier in my car. Don't know anyone who does. So I generally take the file back after it's all signed. Then I scan it and I email them the entire file after we fill it out. That's the listing agreement. Any questions on this form? Anybody can ask any question. I'm going to drink some coffee.
Hey, Tim,
Go ahead.
real quick, back to that 2.5%.
Yeah, go ahead.
So isn't it 2.5 and 3.5?
Yes. But the 3.5 doesn't show up on here. The 3.5 shows up in the form of we charge 6%.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we're charging them 6. We only disclose what we're paying out to a buyer. The seller has to agree to this, but you have to sell them on that. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, but it is there. We don't show it as a 3.5 and a 2.5. We just, it's the way it's going to show that way when you get to the settlement statement, which is going to be, down the road. But yeah, on the listing contract, we charge 6, we're paying out 2.5, which means obviously we're keeping 3.5.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, let's go to the next form. So here's another neat thing about this program. I can go back here, or I can go to my forms right here. If I go to my forms, all the forms are right here. So let's go to consumer notice. We'll only briefly on this. We went through this last week. Same consumer notice we used for the buyer, we used for the seller. And I explained to them, same thing I did for the buyer. So obviously I represent you, the seller, in this agreement of sale, and I'm always going to represent you. But the buyers who are going to bring us, agreements on this property are going to be represented by their own agent. That's the buyer agent. The dual agent would be if I or someone in my company would be the one bringing you an offer on the house. And that's why I said you would have the right to not participate if you don't want to. But by eliminating dual agency, you're basically eliminating all the agents in my company, not just me, from selling your house. Okay. And I usually tell them, and this is perfectly fine for you to tell them this, if I do sell the listing myself, meaning I am not paying a buyer agent, I do cut the commission to 5. I will work for 5% commission when I've got both sides of the transaction. That's also an incentive for them to definitely want to participate in dual agency. However, that does not apply if one of my agents sells it, because my agent is still expected to get paid that 2.5%. Okay, because just like it's in the MLS, and we are duty bound and obligated by our MLS reciprocal agreement, we have to pay our own agents the same way we would pay an agent from a different company. So I can't give them a discount commission if one of my agents sells the property, but I can if I'm the only agent on the deal. Got that? And designated agency basically means that 2 agents in the same company could be a buyer agent or a seller agent, but we don't do that in my company. In fact, most large companies don't. And here's why. The rules stated by the Real Estate Commission to participate in designated agency requires that we have separate fax lines, separate locked file drawers, that buyer agents and seller agents can never see each other's files. The rules are just ridiculous and too ridiculous to police. So it's simply not practical. So if I'm a company that has 6 agents in it, and I've got 3 of them are buyer agents and 3 of them are seller agents, I guess I could practice designated agency. There are some companies out there that practice designated agency because that's their policy, and they're all doing it wrong because they don't have separate files. And if they get nailed in a courtroom one of these days, they're going to find out that that's not the way to go. I'm at PAR. I know what these rules are, and I understand what the risk, the problems that you can have if you get engaged in some kind of a lawsuit and you're telling them that you're going to be a dual agent and you're not representing all parties equally. And if you tell them you're a designated agency and you don't have those systems in place. So we don't practice it, which means you don't practice it. You will only ever be a seller agent representing a seller, a buyer agent representing a buyer, or you're going to be a dual agent and the entire company is a dual agent. Let's keep that in mind in the future. And you could work as a transactional licensee. You're really not going to do this very often. I won't say you'll never do it. Come see me when that would actually apply. Usually that means you're helping your mom or your brother sell their property. You had nothing to do with finding the buyer. They found a buyer on their own, and they come to you and said, Tim, what do we do? I can help you process the paperwork. I can even recommend mortgage companies and title companies and inspectors if you need them. Okay. I'm just not going to legally represent you, but I will do the paperwork. I don't do it for free. And you don't do it for free. No, that's that because you're still inheriting the legal obligation, although to a lesser degree, because you're working as a transaction licensee, we still have some duty legally. In other words, if a seller, even if it's someone you know or it's a relative, decides they want to sue our company because they think we have deep pockets, they can still do it in a transaction licensee. It'll be tougher for them to win the game. But the bottom line is, we always are at risk of being sued by the public if they want to sue us. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, like almost all the time, we win. Okay. But unfortunately, it doesn't mean we win for free. We still got to hire an attorney, or we still got to tap into our, insurance. So really, it's not something you want to do lightly. I have done it for friends and relatives to assist them in the sale of a property when they had no other way to go. All right. And that's pretty much it on consumer notice. They sign it and date it. You sign it. By the way, you should memorize your license number. You may not know it yet, but at some point in time, after you write it enough times, you will. Okay. Next document we have is seller's estimate of closing costs. So here's a quick short note for you. Notice this is blank because I set this file up and I printed out, and this is exactly how I take this file to the settlement or to the listing appointment. Okay. All I have is the address and the name of my client. Keep in mind, I have these fixed amounts already set here, so they know what this is going to be. We haven't determined the purchase price yet. That's why nothing's filled out. Okay. So when I'm in the house and we've gone through our CMA and they've now agreed on our starting price, then I put that on the listing contract. We fill that out. I have them sign a consumer notice. I say, okay, now let me show you what your net walkaway dollars would be. So I'm going to just put this on here now because I'll do it eventually anyway. So I put this property on the market for $199,900, $200,000. 6% real estate fee is, I don't know, what is it? Hold on. It's not 6,000 because I left that $100 off. Oh, it's $6 less than that. So it's, yeah, okay. Guess I could have probably done that in my head, but okay, let's just double check ourselves. So 199.9. Yeah. 11,994. That's what goes there. Now I'm handwriting this in the house, but I'll explain why I'm filling this out right now. Transfer tax is 1%. So we know that's going to be, $19.99. Going to party like it's 1999. Preparation of the deed. Okay, so this is the only fee that the legal document the seller actually pays for. Okay, and the average charge on that I've seen as low as $65 and as high as $150. Okay, so I usually put in 125 average in here. I say, so this is an estimate. Keep in mind, this is an estimate, not exact. And generally speaking, what I tell the seller is this. So basically, the buyer is going to handle who does the settlement. That's not a seller's choice. The only document the seller is responsible for is the deed. So you can have your attorney prepare a deed, and they'll probably charge you $300 or $400 to do that. Or we can simply let the buyer's title company do it. Because all they really do is they take a copy of the old deed, which has the legal description on it. They copy it over on a new piece of paper, and they change the names of who's conveying. So your deed says this person conveyed their property to you when you bought it. You're now going to be the seller who's conveying a property to the new buyer. The title company can prepare all that. You don't have to be an attorney to copy something that's already been established as a legal description. That's why a title company can do that. And they charge a lot less. And I'll tell them, sometimes they only charge $75 or 100. Sometimes they charge 150. On average, 100 to 125 is what I see most of the time. So that's what I'm going to plug in here. Now, I don't know if there's going to be a seller assist, so I don't put that in as an estimate of closing costs. There probably won't be in this market right now. If the seller has told me, yes, I want you to put the warranty on here, then I will plug in a warranty. If the property is in an area that has a municipal certification, get familiar with what that is. If you're not sure, when you go into the MLS, you can go into the links there and they will tell you all the places that have that. And then you can click on that link and find out what the fee is. So for example, in the city of Allentown, it's $100 for a city inspection. Okay, the seller pays for the inspection. The repairs that may come from that are negotiable. Seller doesn't have to pay for that. But if you remember from the agreement of sale last week, it said on there, in an area where that's the law that the seller order an inspection from the local municipality, they must do so. And they have to do it within a certain time frame, at least 15 days prior to settlement. And then, of course, they present that report to the buyer, and who's going to fix it and do repairs is entirely up to the negotiation process. But the cost to do it is the seller's responsibility, unless it's not. Anything can be excluded. If you're selling a bank-owned property, they'll tell you right on there, buyer responsible for the 2% transfer tax and any municipal inspection requirements. So the buyer who was buying that distressed property will usually see that in the agent remarks on the listing, and you let them up front. By the way, you got to pay the 2% transfer tax because the bank doesn't. So there are always exceptions and ways to get around that. But in a normal, what I call retail transaction, seller selling a retailable home to a buyer who wants to buy this and live in this property, that's what I call a retail sale, not a wholesale sale. Then it's common that means so. In this case here, this property is in South Whitehall. They do not have a municipal inspection, so I don't have that. But if this is in Whitehall, it'd be $100. Allentown, $100. Bethlehem, $150. Bethlehem Township, $150. Easton, I think, is still $100. Okay. Double check on that when you're listing a property. So municipal certification. Certificate of resale only would apply to condos or homeowner associations. This property is none of those. Settlement fee, I don't put anything in there. Notary fees, I'll plug in $20. It's usually less than that, but there's always some notary stamps on the settlement. Okay. Survey, not required. On-lot sewage pumping. If I'm selling a property that has a septic system, generally the seller is going to pump the system out after the buyer does any inspections they want to. Now, it can be negotiated, but I will usually plug in a number here, and it's usually $300. This case here, this house has public water and sewer. I'm plugging nothing in. I'm not plugging property repairs in or tax certifications in. Overnight express mail charges. If there's a mortgage on the property and you're going to ask them that, then you're going to plug in $25. If they have more than one mortgage on there, you're going to plug in $25 for each one they have. That's the wiring fee for them to overnight or express mail or wire the payoff to the lender. And that's done by the title company at settlement, because since interest accrues at a per diem basis, if you waited for the snail mail to get the payoff to the bank, they're going to probably pay a lot more than $25 in interest waiting for that mortgage to get paid off. So that's done by the title company as soon as the settlement's done. So I always plug in a number there. Domestic lien search, Patriot Act search, don't need any of that. So this is typically what you'll see initially when I'm going in there and listing it. Okay. And I'm doing this by hand. Now, why am I bothering doing this now? Real simple. Because once I have an offer on this property, which I'll probably have one by Wednesday or more, okay, I'm going to, on the one that the seller accepts, I'm going to have them sign another estimate of closing costs. So we have to sign an estimate of closing costs when we list a property, giving them the best information we can to let them know what their net walkaway dollars would be. But we also have to make one specific once we have a contract. With a contract, we're going to have a buyer's name to fill in. That's what you do. We're going to have a settlement date to fill in. Once we have a settlement date, we can also do the proration of taxes. See down here on the estimate, I just put to be determined. And notice what I like about this form is it does all the math for you. Now, I also happen to know, because I've got one of these filled out when I was in the house, that she owes about $137,000 on this property. So that's what her net would be based on this offer that we have right here, based on what we know right now. Now, I'm going to leave this in here and save it because I know I'm going to come back to this once I have an offer on the property. So you just go up here and save it. And I've now got this closing cost estimate ready to go. But initially, when I prepare this file before I go to the property, this is pretty much blank. I've just got this information right here. I don't have any numbers to plug in at this point. And I don't bother filling in a tax proration, which you can do or not do. I do it because it helps them. Tax proration, you just got to remember that the county municipal is billed January 1 to December 31st. Once you know the settlement date, you can figure the proration out. It doesn't have to be exact. You can actually be exact by taking the total taxes divided by 365 days, and you'll get what the per diem is. Or you can just break it down to monthly. If the taxes are $2,000 a year and school tax, let's say, and divide up by 12, I know I'm going to have X amount per month, and I can prorate the taxes just based on that. It's designed to be estimate, not to the penny, but you got to give them some kind of an idea. So when I met with her and we went through this whole thing, I said, so roughly you're going to get about 48,000 or maybe 49,000. Actually, by the time we go to settlement on this property, your mortgage may be a little less than this 137. Won't know that till you get an accurate payoff. I don't need an accurate payoff to give you an estimate. The title company needs an accurate payoff so that you can settle on the property. I don't. So this form's done. Any questions on the, I know there's no question on the consumer notice. Any question on the estimate of closing costs here they have to do? The short version of the estimate of closing costs, if you want to know, just to keep it in your head, is, I don't know why that keeps coming up, is really, it's 6% real estate fee, 1% transfer tax. So it's 7% of the sale price plus a couple $100 at best. That's what we're seeing here. I mean, unless there's a home warranty involved or you're going to do a sewer pumping, it's under $200, the miscellaneous fees here. So the closing cost is pretty easy to figure in your head. 6% real estate fee, 1% transfer tax. So 7% of the sale price plus a couple $100 is going to roughly give you what the estimate close. So when you're at parties and someone says, what's it going to cost me to sell my house? You can say, well, probably roughly 7% plus about $200, maybe a little bit more, depending on what you want to do. Like if you have a sewer that needs to be pumped, or if you want to buy a home warranty for the buyer. But generally, that's what it comes into. Now, why are the rest of these things on here? Well, let's say in the contract negotiation down the road, there's inspections done and we do an addendum. And now we find out that the seller is going to give the buyer $4,000 in seller assist to cover repairs. Well, you have to write a new estimate of closing costs anytime you change something. It should be in the file. So you can come back to your file here and you can update it by adding this, whatever. Yeah, where did it say it? I know it saw it somewhere. Yeah, property repairs. That's where it'd be. Or a lot of times we could just, instead of the repairs, we'll give the seller a credit. We'll call it a seller assist. So you'd plug that in right here and you'd have a new estimate of closing costs that you could send out to them and have it digitally signed. Just that simple. Last form we're going to talk about here is, and we're not going to talk much about it. I can tell you that right now. You're just going to see it. Here's the seller's disclosure statement. This is as much as you're going to be able to do before you go to the house. Name, address, and the name of the seller. Okay. And it's all going to be blank. And in the house, you're going to go through all these questions and fill out this form. And you're going to do the same thing if the property was built before 1978 and you have the lead paint disclosure form. There's what it looks like. It's real simple. Sellers typically going to say they have no knowledge of the presence of lead paint. And on this line, they're going to say they have no records of reports pertaining to lead paint. And then they're going to sign right here and date it. And then you're going to, you're going to sign, where's here? Right here. You're going to initial here. You, the agent, licensee, represent that the agent has informed the seller of their obligations under Residential Lead-Based Paint Hazardous Act of 42 USC, blah, 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 and is aware of the agent's responsibility to ensure compliance. And basically that means that, you've let them know that if you have reports, you have to show those reports. If you know the property has been tested and you have knowledge of it, you have to disclose that. As I said, most people don't test for lead paint for the same reasons I outlined last week when it came to the lead paint discussion on the agreement of sale. And then, of course, you're going to sign it here. Now, notice this is also a form that gets signed by the buyer. So we're as far as we can go on this form with the listing. After you have these forms back in the office, you're going to scan the seller's disclosure and the residential lead paint disclosure, if you have one in that case there, and you're going to put that into the multi-list when you put the listing in the system, or you're going to have someone do it. Those forms get uploaded to the listing. So those are there for them to wear. That way, when you're the buyer agent and you have this listing and you're writing an offer, you're going to go in there and you're going to download the seller's disclosure. Remember mentioning that last week on the agreement of sale, have the copy of the listing in front of you, the tax record in front of you, and the seller's disclosure, and this pertains to the lead if it applies as well, in front of you, so that you can scan those and send those to your buyer. Then once that's complete, you'll have a complete file. Any questions on the seller's disclosure process at this point? We're doing okay. It's 6:08. Okay. All right, then that gives me a chance to go in here and give you a little bit of a preview on the buyer sides. So I'm going to go out of here. Okay. Stop sharing this screen. Okay. And I'm going to share this one. Okay. This is a preview of what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. And yeah, it looks a little bit hieroglyphic. So to start with, we're going to start with this thing from the bottom up, because that's really where it starts. So what you have to understand when you're going to go on a listing presentation nowadays is it really is a job interview. And in fact, I think that's what the title is on the top of this, the interview track. So this is the track that I have been using for 30 some years now. Well, almost 30 years to the day, actually. I think we took that course in, it's like July or something. I think it was warm out. So it's not quite 30 years. I'm coming up on the anniversary, but I've been using this interview track for a long, long time. This is a track, and it's not a script. It's not a one-act play, but it kind of is, and that's kind of how you want to treat it. There's no wrong way to do this track. You don't necessarily have to do the steps in order. So when we go through this tomorrow, I'm going to go through it step by step as if it's the perfect one-act play and you are doing it in order. But what you're going to eventually do is you're going to internalize this so that you're never lost or confused in a listing presentation. So anybody that's been in the business a little bit and hasn't seen this, you've probably gone out there and there's been times in your listing presentation when you've been, not sure where to go from there. Not sure how to answer that question. If you have this track internalized in your brain, you will never be in that position. And this is what's going to make you that confident and competent realtor who has all the answers and at the snap of their fingers are going to be able to win with this client, because people like to work with confident people and competent people. And how do they know that you're competent until you prove it to them? So the first place we're going to start down here is the introduction. Keep in mind, what is your purpose? Well, the old method and the old school method of training you to be a realtor was you want to get the listing, get it at whatever cost you can. And that was the old sales method of saying, well, it's just like, you want to sell cars, you want to get the sale, don't you? Isn't that what? Got to get them in that bucket of bolts out there. I mean, that was what you were taught if you ever took any professional sales courses. I've taken quite a few of them. I've been through a bunch of them. And the first time I realized I wasn't a salesman was when I started selling real estate, because we really aren't, Oh yeah, people say, oh, you're a salesman. Oh, I don't like salesmen. Well, that's good, because I'm not selling you anything, because I'm not the seller, am I? Who's selling it? The seller's selling it. You're the buyer. Am I trying to shove you in something you don't want? Absolutely not. I'm going to show you as many houses you need to see. Okay. And I'm going to show you how to get from point A to point Z successfully with the least amount of problems. Okay. So I'm not selling you anything. You're going to buy what you want. Okay. So this is the easiest sales business in the world. So what is my real purpose here then? My purpose is to help this seller make a good decision. Hopefully that's me, but we don't know that yet. We're just starting, but I'm going to keep it in the back of my mind what my purpose is here. And because of that, I'm going to be asking them a series of questions along the way here to try to find out what their goals are. Okay. Same as I did last week when I was working with a buyer. What did I ask the buyer? Well, how long have you been looking for a property? How soon do you need a property? What's your housing situation like now? Are you in a lease? Are you got a house to sell? You moving from another country? What's going on? I'm asking those questions to gain knowledge on how I can best help this person. My job is to help them make a good decision. Well, the same thing works on the seller side. Since I know some of the answers, I know you're living in your house. So I'm going to ask them questions like, well, why are you thinking of selling? Where are you going from here? That it's all, standard stuff, right? So my job is to help them make a good decision. I'm going to ask them, I'm going to arrange a job interview. So this is designed to say they call you on the phone and you're going to get 1 or 2 or 3 responses. You're going to try to qualify the seller. You don't need to do any of that. Okay. One of the things I will tell you, in the interest of full disclosure, is that some of this stuff in the script is a little bit dated. Okay. Because look at that telephone. That's dated. It could only be worse if there was a dial on it. Okay. But at least it has push buttons on it. Okay. But the point is that, and probably this script had dial phone on it before I ever saw it. So I don't know. But I don't know that they've ever updated. I don't even know if Steve Woodruff is still doing it anymore. The bottom line is I took this course and it was very successful for me. And applying new technology of today, to this same strip will still make you a winner. So however you got this, I mean, maybe you got this because it was an internet lead from Zillow. I don't know. Maybe it's a warm market and it is your mother, your brother, your sister, your cousin, or a friend from college, or somebody you went to school with, or someone that lived next door to you 10 years ago. Hey, I didn't know you were in real estate now. Or maybe it's your doctor or your lawyer or whatever. And they say, hey, you're selling real estate. You know what? I got something I might want to sell. You want to come out and take a look at my property? Yeah, absolutely. And then you're going to bring me with you, hopefully, because you definitely want to do that the first 3 times you go out so that I can keep you on track. And here's how it'll work. If I go with you on a listing presentation, I'm going to do all the work and you're going to do nothing. You're going to watch. Okay. You're going to be, obviously, you're going to be responsive if they ask you a question, but you're basically going to let me do all the work. And then the second time we go out, you're going to do the work and I'm going to watch, and I'm going to step in when you need some help. And that means that we might do 50-50. And the third time you go out, you're going to do 90% of the work and I'm going to maybe help you close it. And that's it. I generally go with a new agent on 3 listing appointments. After that, you should be able to wing this on your own, because after you've done it a couple of times and you've internalized it, you will get good at it and you won't need me. And that's when your confidence level goes from here to here. Okay, that's what you want to do. So arranging the job interview, however way you got that appointment, qualifying the seller, we'll qualify them when we're in the house. Drop off a silent salesperson. You don't need to do that. But I'll tell you what that is. So we actually used to have a book that we had printed out that had evidence of our past success. It had other listings, other contracts, maybe testimonial letters from our clients. I still have mine, by the way. It's a neat book. And the idea was you were supposed to drop this off maybe a day before the listing, and you would ring the bell and you say, oh, I just want to drop this off so you know a little bit more about me. Obviously, you wouldn't need to do that if this is a warm market contact, but you would drop it off because you knew you were automatically in competition. So you would drop this off ahead of time so that they could get an eye on you before you meet with them. And they said, well, you're here now. Why don't you come in? You would say, no, I've got another appointment. I can't stay. You would want them to internalize this. The way you do that nowadays is you send them an email. You send them a link to your website. You don't need to do a silent salesperson and physically drop it off. So here's where the technology basically is going to be transferred. Visualize what you want this appointment to be like. And what you're going to be visualizing are all these steps right here. And I'll give you the short and brief version, and then we're done for the night. So you qualified the seller after you got in the house, dropped off the silent salesperson. No, you sent them information about yourself. You visualize, greet them at the door, smile, pay them a sincere compliment. Oh, what a nice whatever. You want to take them to the kitchen table in a perfect world. Sometimes sellers will say, oh, do you want to take a look at the house right now? It's perfectly fine to do the tour up front. But the track says, no, let's go to the kitchen table. And why are you going to go to the kitchen table? Because after you pay them a sincere compliment, you take them to the kitchen table. And by the way, why the kitchen table? Because guests sit in the dining room. Family sits in the kitchen. So obviously, sometimes houses don't have an eat-in kitchen, whatever. But I'm saying you basically conform to whatever fits for you. But you want to basically take possession of the interview. You want to calm them down. You want to answer any questions they have. You want to ask them some questions. You're going to do that by breaking the ice. Then you're going to ask them a big question like, well, what will happen to your plans if your house doesn't sell? And that's taking the sale away from them. And what you're saying is that, well, not all houses sell in every market. Although in this market right now, you probably have nothing to worry about. And then you're going to take them out to the safest island and you're going to tell them about the integrity, strength, skills, and the strength of your marketing plan. This is where you're working them into basically being the one that's going to be the best choice for them. You take them to the safest island. You take them out here and you explain your skill and strength of your marketing plan and the integrity of you and your company. Then you're going to ask them another series of questions. They're going to answer, and you're going to write down those answers. Okay. And after you do that, you're going to tour the property. So now you may have toured the property already. No right or wrong order, but in a perfect world, we tour the property, we go through the property, we make recommendations, we take them back and we tell them about our 10-step marketing plan. Where are we going back to? To the kitchen table again. We explain that 10-step marketing plan, and then we invite them to do business with us. And one of 2 ways that goes. They say, yes, I want to do business with you, and you do the listing paperwork we just went through, and you hand them a pen, they sign it, you visualize through your flight recorder how this went. Then you don't forget to send them a thank you note. If they don't sign it at that point in time, after you've given them an invitation to do business, you say, well, that's fine. I understand I'm in competition. And, you know, I definitely want to make sure that when you interview other agents, use me as your measuring stick. Make sure they're going to do all the things that I said I can do for you here. By the way, when is a good time to get back to you? When do you think you'll be making a good decision? Okay. And why do you want to do that? Because you don't want to say, here's my card, give me a call when you're ready. No, do that. Say, okay, when do you think you'll be making a decision? So like in the case of my listing here, and this is a warm market for me because I sold her to the house, no worries there. But in that case there, it was like, when are you ready? And she goes, well, I need to sell this house, but I don't want to move until June 7th. Now I'm here in January and she's calling me and saying, yeah, I want to get my house on the market because I don't know how many months it's going to take. I said, how about I'll have you sold in 5 days? Okay. I says, so no one's going to buy your property now and want to wait until June to settle. She didn't want her last kid's in high school and she's graduating this year. And that graduation date is June 7th. She doesn't want to leave the house until June 8th. I said, fine, let's list your property on April 1st, because that'll give us time to get it sold. And pretty much anybody will work with that 60-day or so window of opportunity. And that's why we put the property on the market last week, and I'll have it sold by Wednesday. Okay. But if they said to you, well, we're not sure when we're going to list the property, great, I'll give you a call in a couple of days. Or if they say, we're not ready to list for at least a month, no problem, I'll give you a call in a month. You be the one to call them. Visualize how it went. And what's the visualization for? Visualization is for you to go back through your presentation here, and we're going to cover this in more detail tomorrow, so that you can see, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? Did you miss a step along the way? Is there something you could have done a little bit better? Be your own critic. Okay. Make sure you critique what you did so that you can absolutely determine whether or not you think you did a good job or not. That's the way you get better. Once you've got this thing down, you don't need to visualize it anymore because you'll have it internalized. And by the way, even if they don't list you with that night, send them a thank you note. Postage is not that expensive, but expensive enough if you're sending out hundreds of letters, but sending one note out every time you buy a bunch of thank you notes at Staples or something, they're not that expensive. You got little white ones with gold embossment. It even looks like it came from Century 21. By the way, you can go on Century 21 site and buy them and pay a lot more for them, but they'll have your company name on. Send a thank you note. That's what's important. Like I said, they're cheap. $5 you can get a 10-pack and they look nice. And it's going to cost you, what is a stamp? 55 cents? I don't even know. Anyway, you buy the stamp, put it on there and say, all right, several things are taken for granted in life. I want you to know the time I spent with you and your business are not, something to that effect. I mean, that used to work for me. That might be corny today. I don't know. But anyway, that's the interview track. We're going to go into this in more detail tomorrow. Any other questions before we wrap it up here today? No questions? Everybody's got this, right? It's good. It's actually not hard. It's just a matter of like anything else. You practice it until you get it right. Selling real estate is not rocket science, but you can make a lot of goofs if you don't have at least a plan, a flight plan. Okay. And that's all we're trying to do here is give you a leg up. And by the way, your competition doesn't have this. Okay. They're still in the, well, I'm lucky if I get 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 listings. Once you get this thing down, you'll get every listing almost. There's every once in a while I don't get one and I go, they must have had a relative in the business and maybe they were just trying to keep them honest. I can't imagine why they didn't hire me. Anyway, and that might sound cocky to you, but that's just a level of confidence that you get over time from doing this. And you want that. It's okay to be a little bit cocky when you are doing something you like and that you know that you're confident in doing, because they're hiring you to be that confident person. So be that confident person. Last chance. Any other questions? Then I thank you very much. Go ahead.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Bill Lake. Hey, listen, a little unrelated to the class tonight, but I keep getting
Can always help. Go ahead.
I keep getting these text messages now. They say, like, for instance, on Saturday, it said City, East Stroudsburg, Channel, Central.
Okay. They must have you enrolled in the lead program. Okay. So if you're not in there, you will be in there. So, all right. So we have a new program that's just starting up. The old program we had was called Zap. Okay. And those were calls that you would get from, I think they came from, where's that coming from? Colorado. Okay, it's a Colorado number. Anybody who's been around a while, that's where our old lead program. We're always, I say we, this is Century 21, always trying to improve things. And some new stuff they're kicking out is this thing called MoxieWorks, okay? And we were actually picked as the trial company to use this program. The rest of the Century 21s in the Valley don't have this yet. They'll have it, I think that's on target for by the end of the year. We just discussed all this when we were in Vegas a week ago. So it is being filtered out. We are getting that. I've gotten some of them as well. Just like the other leads, if you have time to investigate them, you can. It means that someone has made an inquiry on a website or from a link from somewhere where they saw this listing, and you're in the rotation. This is how we get leads. In the old days, when I started in the company, you came to the office every day and you had what was called floor time. Okay, so when I started in real estate, you came in and you had floor time, and every agent would have. Now, of course, our company had like 20 agents in it at the time, so you'd get 2 hours, maybe every 3 days, that you'd have to be in the office. Had to go to the office in those days. Now you don't. You do everything from your computer practically. But you go in and, oh, you're on floor time from 10 to 2 today. Okay, so I had 4 hours. I'm the one getting the calls, and there would always be a backup agent in case you were on the phone, and you would be basically. That's where the ringing of the phone, the 1, 2, 3. Oh, you're interested in listing your house? Okay. By the way, where's your house located? And you would go through some qualifying questions to find out what their motivation level was. That's what that presentation was all about there. We don't do it that way. Now you get a call and it's somebody inquiring about a listing, and you want to, that's a separate class you take for that. Did you take that already? That class?
No.
Okay, you will at some point. It's going to be one of those things where the lead program is designed for you to be able to, ask that person, okay, great. Let me look up that listing for you. Let me get your phone number or your email address or something so I can call you back if you don't already have it. Depends on how the lead came in. And then you would look up the listing and you say, good news, that property is still available. When do you want to see it? And you go for the appointment. And just like I said last week with the buyer lead, don't get in the weeds with trying to pre-qualify them over the phone just because you think you might waste your time driving to an appointment. Good news, let's go see the house. Then go through the presentation I did last week, asking the questions. By the way, how soon do you need a house? What are you looking for? Blah, blah, blah. That's the way you take that lead. If the lead comes in and you're interested in, I'm interested in selling my house and I want to know what you charge. Great. Well, that really depends on what other properties like yours are selling for and what they're charging, because you've got to be competitive with your own market. But we can discuss all that in person. When would you have time to meet? Okay. And you're going for the appointment. Once again, the whole key is on a lead is to convert it to appointment. That's your only goal when you have a lead. Convert it to an appointment. It'll either be a good appointment or it'll be a waste of time. So what? You're going to waste your time sometimes. You don't think if you're working at a car, I always use the car dealership because they're so similar in that they're selling a big ticket item, except they wait for people to come through their door for an appointment. Someone comes through your door for an appointment. What's the first thing they do? We've all bought cars. Yeah. How can I help you? What are you looking for? What are you driving now? Okay. You got something to trade in? So asking those questions to someone to find out what their need is in real estate is pretty normal. Okay. And it doesn't mean you have to be pressured to do that. And everybody looks at that as like pressure. It's like, well, I always feel that way when I go to a car dealership too. So I get that. But the point is that it's not really a pressure thing. It's simply an inquiry, which we need to know what we need to know in order to be able to help them. So, take that lead seriously, do what you can with it. The conversion of leads is actually almost terrible. Okay. Most agents convert 4% of the leads that comes in, and that's awful. You should be converting 40%, 50%, 60%. All you have to do is try a little bit, find out what they want. And if you can help them find what they want, look, you'll get that call that says, yeah, you got any rentals? Yeah, maybe. What are you looking for? Well, I don't know, but I'm just getting kicked out of my apartment. Okay. All right. Well, that's probably not going anywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
But renters become buyers a lot of times too. I have plenty of people I started with that rented properties. Let me find what I can for you. I'll be honest with you. I don't take rental calls anymore. I just don't have time for them. But I absolutely think it's a good idea for new agents to do that. 20% of my business I built up in the beginning from people who needed to rent something, and they remembered me when they needed to buy something. And not every one of the people that I did rentals with became buyers, but a lot of them did. When you think of being in it for the long game, everybody needs to buy something at some point in time. All right, fair disclosure, some people will rent all their lives. Majority of us don't. The majority of us are going to rent sometime and we're going to buy sometime. Who do you think they're going to remember?
Mhm.
It's up to you. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're brand new in the business, you're a little less busy than me. I mean, I'm super busy. I had 3 settlements Friday and a listing appointment at 5 o'clock. I didn't get till 8:30. Okay. So I had to skip karaoke night on Friday. That busted me up. But anyway, did that on Saturday anyway. So anyway, yeah. So definitely use that.
So that's great. I mean, I obviously, I guess I probably shouldn't do that just yet, right? Until,
No,
I mean,
what have you got to lose? No one else is going to call that lead probably.
okay.
It may bounce to someone else and it may not.
You said there's a training for that. Is that on the website?
There's a course. Yeah, there's a small course that you take. I'm not even sure where it is. You got to check with Lauren on that because this is all brand new. I used to be, we had a course that you just pop into from Century 21, and it may be on 121 online. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. Okay. Because I obviously don't need the course. I knew as soon as it came through what it is. And if I'm busy, I don't take the call. If I'm not busy, I absolutely take the call and see what's there. And yeah, some of them are losers. Some of them are good.
All right. No, that's great.
I got a Zap lead a couple of years ago that resulted in $1 million in business. Okay. So don't take them lightly. Called on one of my listings that was listed for $400,000. And I ended up selling them my listing. So I was on both sides of that. That's an $800,000 sale. And they had a $200,000 property to sell. It was other side of Reading, but they were moving in this area. I go, yeah, I can list out there. Wasn't what I wanted to do, but I went out there and I listed the house. I didn't have time to show it. It was like an hour and 20 minutes away, but it got sold. I still got paid. So I ended up doing about $1 million in business from that one call. So you never know.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you.
Right. Any other questions? See you tomorrow.
Have a good night.
You too.